The modern paradox: comfort without fulfillment. Have you ever wondered why, in an era with more comfort, entertainment, and pleasures than any previous generation, we are paradoxically more anxious, depressed, and empty? Why? Despite having everything within a click's reach, we feel as if something fundamental is missing. Think about your day. How many times have you checked your phone today? How many hours have you spent on social media, streaming shows, games, or any other kind of pleasurable distraction? And how do you feel afterward? Truly fulfilled or strangely empty? Wanting more? It's no coincidence. You're experiencing exactly what two of the 20th century's most prophetic thinkers predicted with frightening accuracy. Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, and Viktor Frankl, neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor. They warned us about something we're only now beginning to understand. Pleasure is not our friend. At least not the constant, easy, effortless pleasure that our modern society glorifies. In fact, this relentless pursuit of comfort and immediate satisfaction has transformed into an invisible prison that is slowly killing us. Not physically, but spiritually. Today I'll show you how this trap works, why it's so difficult to notice, and more importantly, how to escape it before it's too late. There is one pleasure that can be beneficial for me and you. The pleasure of your like and subscription to the channel, but only if you've enjoyed the content and learned something useful for your life. While the world seeks pleasure to numb itself, you'll seek meaning. Let these videos accompany you during breaks in your day, on walks, in your routine. Sometimes it's by hearing something true while doing something simple that you begin to awaken. Two prophets, one warning. The Huxley-Frankl connection. When Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World in 1932, he imagined a dystopia radically different from George Orwell's 1984. While Orwell feared we would be destroyed by what we hate, oppression, surveillance, explicit control, Huxley warned that we would be destroyed by what we love. In a letter to Orwell, Huxley wrote, "The will to power cannot be satisfied except negatively, by the imposition of suffering. The will to power positively expressed leads to the desire to cause pleasure. The government of the whip will be replaced by the government of Pavlovian-style reward." In other words, Huxley predicted that the real danger wouldn't be dictators imposing pain, but systems that would enslave us through pleasure. A tyranny not of punishment, but of reward. Viktor Frankl, meanwhile, didn't need to imagine a dystopian future. He lived through hell itself in Nazi concentration camps. But his deepest revelation wasn't about suffering itself, but about what gives meaning to human life. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote, "It is not the pursuit of happiness that provides meaning to life, but the pursuit of meaning that provides happiness." Through his extreme experience, Frankl realized that those who psychologically survived the camps weren't necessarily the physically strongest, but those who maintained a purpose, a meaning, even in the most inhuman conditions. The neuroscience of meaning versus pleasure. What Huxley and Frankl understood, and what modern neuroscience now confirms, is that the human brain wasn't designed for constant happiness. It was designed to seek meaning, purpose, and growth, even if that involves discomfort. A fascinating study from the University of Chicago tracked the psychological well-being of two groups over 6 months. The first group was instructed to maximize pleasure and minimize pain in their lives. The second was guided to pursue meaningful activities, even if challenging or uncomfortable. The results: the pleasure-focused group reported higher levels of momentary well-being, but had a 32% increase in anxiety symptoms and a 37% decline in their perception of life purpose by the end of the study. In contrast, the meaning-seeking group faced more difficulties in the short term, but showed a 24% reduction in anxiety symptoms and a 43% increase in their sense of purpose and life satisfaction. This might seem counterintuitive, but Frankl would explain that what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. Huxley describes this same trap in his novel, where citizens are kept in perpetual satisfaction through soma, a drug without side effects that provides instant vacations from reality. The result: a docile, infantilized population incapable of emotional depth or personal growth. Modern soma, the invisible addiction all around us. When Huxley wrote about soma, it seemed like science fiction. Today it looks like fulfilled prophecy. Our soma comes in many forms: endless scrolling of social media feeds, binge-watching series, pornography, addictive games, impulse shopping, fast food, all delivering instant dopamine at the touch of a button. Neuroscience confirms what these visionaries feared. A recent study published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions demonstrated that intensive smartphone use causes brain alterations similar to those observed in chemical dependencies. Researchers documented a reduction in gray matter in regions associated with self-regulation and a sensitization of reward circuits that require progressively more intense stimuli to achieve the same satisfaction. It's exactly what Huxley predicted: a public that would love its oppression, that would adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Frankl would call this an existential vacuum, the feeling of emptiness and lack of purpose that arises when a life is dedicated only to avoiding pain and pursuing pleasure. In his words, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. A global survey conducted by Harvard University interviewed over 100,000 people in 78 countries and found that, despite the exponential increase in material comfort and entertainment, levels of life satisfaction have remained stagnant or fallen over the past 50 years. More alarming, 68% of respondents reported a feeling of existential vacuum, exactly the term Frankl coined decades earlier. Loving our chains, the perfect slavery. But perhaps Huxley's most disturbing observation was, the greatest enemy of freedom is a contented slave. When we become dependent on easy pleasures, we lose the ability and even the desire to be free. Perfect slavery isn't one where we're forced by chains, but one where we love our chains too much to consider breaking them. Frankl would add that this pursuit of pleasure without purpose not only fails to satisfy, but transforms into a new form of suffering. When the meaning of life is questioned, then nothing matters anymore. Pleasure itself becomes empty. The ingenuity of this trap is that it disguises itself as freedom. I have so many entertainment options. I can order any food without leaving home. I can chat with anyone in the world with a click. But as Huxley observed, in a really efficient totalitarian state, the all-powerful executive and its brain manager controllers would control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced, because they love their servitude. Practical application: breaking free from the pleasure trap. How do we escape this sophisticated trap that Huxley and Frankl predicted? How do we reclaim our humanity in a culture designed to transform us into passive consumers of pleasure? Here are 5 practical strategies directly inspired by these visionaries' ideas. First, practice dopamine fasting. Huxley warned about the constant sensory stimulation of the modern world. He recognized that when we're perpetually entertained, we lose the capacity for deep contemplation. In his essay, Culture and the Individual, he wrote, "The crowd is now more distracted than ever, and distractions are now so diversified and so intense that the effect is at once continuous and imperceptible." Practical exercise. Establish regular periods of dopamine fasting, 24 to 48-hour intervals, where you deliberately eliminate all sources of digital gratification. No smartphone, no social media, no streaming, no video games. At first, you'll feel restlessness and even physical withdrawal symptoms, evidence of a dependency you didn't even know you had. Gradually, you'll notice the return of your capacity to appreciate simple stimuli, like a physical book, a focused conversation, or a sunset. Second, find meaning in challenge. Frankl discovered in concentration camps that those who psychologically survived were those who found purpose even in extreme suffering. In his words, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Practical exercise. Identify an area of your life where you consistently choose the easiest or most pleasurable path. Now, replace it with a deliberate challenge that aligns with your deepest values. For example, instead of spending the weekend watching shows, commit to a creative or learning project that requires concentrated effort. The initial resistance will give way to a much deeper satisfaction than passive pleasure could ever offer. Third, create space for contemplation. Huxley feared we would be drowned in information and deprived of thought. In his book, The Human Situation, he wrote, "There is no reason to suppose that 20th century totalitarianism will use the same methods as past dictatorships. In an era of advanced technology, deprivation would be unnecessary. Slavery would be achieved by feeding people a constant diet of distractions." Practical exercise. Set aside 20 minutes daily for unguided contemplation. No books, no music, no structured meditation. Just you and your thoughts. Keep a notebook nearby to record insights, but don't structure this time. The goal isn't productivity, but recovering your capacity for deep thinking, which is being eroded by constant external stimulation. Fourth, practice self-distancing. Frankl developed a technique called self-distancing, the ability to observe yourself objectively and choose your response to stimuli instead of automatically reacting. He explained, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Practical exercise. When you feel the urge to seek instant gratification, checking your phone, opening social media, eating something you're not hungry for, practice pausing and asking, stop for 10 seconds and ask, what am I really seeking in this moment? What am I trying to avoid? Does this choice bring me closer to or further from the person I want to be? This small space between impulse and action is where your freedom begins. Fifth, cultivate deep relationships. Both Huxley and Frankl warned about the superficiality of human connections in a pleasure-obsessed society. Huxley described disposable, commitment-free relationships in his novel. Frankl observed that genuine love, seeing potential in another and helping them realize it, is one of the greatest sources of meaning. Practical exercise. Identify an important relationship in your life and commit to deepening it. Replace an entertainment-based interaction, like passively watching something together, with a meaningful conversation. Ask about their values, dreams, fears, not just their opinions or superficial experiences. Practice total listening, without digital distractions. You'll see that deep relationships require more effort, but offer satisfaction that no passive pleasure can match. Applying in real situations, from theory to practice, let's see how these principles can be applied in 3 common situations of modern life. Situation 1. Social media addiction. Typical reaction. Compulsively scrolling feeds for hours, justifying it as relaxation or staying informed, while feeling growing dissatisfaction. Huxley-Frankl perspective. Huxley would see this as digital soma, distraction that prevents deep thought. Frankl would identify it as an escape from the existential vacuum. Alternative response. I recognize that I use social media not for genuine connection, but to avoid discomfort and seek instant validation. I'll limit this use to 30 minutes daily at specific times and redirect that time to a meaningful project I've been postponing. When I feel the urge to check, I'll practice self-distancing by asking, what am I avoiding in this moment? Situation 2. Passive entertainment. Typical reaction. Spending hours on series or videos without really appreciating them, just to turn off the brain, ending up exhausted and unsatisfied. Huxley-Frankl perspective. Huxley would warn about the numbing of the mind through constant stimulation. Frankl would see it as a symptom of lack of purpose. When we don't have a why, we fill the void with distractions. Alternative response. Instead of passively consuming unlimited content, I'll consciously choose one film or series with artistic or intellectual value per week. I'll watch with full attention, without multitasking. On other days, I'll redirect that time to develop a skill I've always wanted to learn. I accept that growth might be uncomfortable initially, but will lead to deeper satisfaction than passive entertainment. Situation 3. Compulsive consumerism. Typical reaction. Buying impulsively to experience the brief pleasure of acquisition, followed by dissatisfaction and desire for more. Huxley-Frankl perspective. Huxley would see this as social conditioning to remain in the work-earn-spend cycle that keeps the system running. Frankl would identify it as an attempt to fill the existential vacuum with material possessions. Alternative response. Before each non-essential purchase, I'll wait 72 hours. During that time, I'll reflect on whether this item contributes to my greater purpose or just offers momentary satisfaction. I'll redirect part of the money I would spend impulsively toward experiences that provide growth or meaningful causes. I recognize that my identity and worth aren't in the objects I possess, but in the values I live and the meaning I create. Reclaiming our humanity, the path forward. Let's recap the fundamental principles we've discussed. 1. Constant, effortless pleasure doesn't lead to lasting satisfaction, but to dependency and existential emptiness. 2. The human brain wasn't designed for constant happiness, but to seek meaning and growth, even when uncomfortable. 3. Perpetual distraction and passive entertainment undermine our capacity for deep thought and contemplation. 4. Finding purpose, even in the most challenging circumstances, is crucial for psychological well-being. 5. Genuine freedom requires the ability to resist immediate impulses and make choices aligned with deeper values. 6. Meaningful relationships require effort and vulnerability, but provide satisfaction that passive pleasures never could. 7. Self-distancing, creating space between stimulus and response, is where our true freedom can be exercised. Aldous Huxley warned us about a world where we would be enslaved not by pain, but by pleasure. A system so ingenious that we would love our own servitude. Viktor Frankl, having witnessed the worst of humanity, showed us that even in the most extreme conditions, what sustains the human spirit is not comfort, but meaning. As Huxley wrote in his last novel, Island, it's so much harder to remember that life is deep and meaningful than to forget it. And Frankl would add, man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life, not a secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. A call to conscious living. Their message for us today is clear and urgent. We must resist the seduction of the easy pleasure culture, not just for our individual well-being, but to preserve our very humanity. Look around you. Observe how every aspect of the modern environment is designed to keep you comfortable, entertained, and consuming. See how the technology that promised to free us is chaining us in new, sophisticated forms of dependency. Now look within. With brutal honesty, ask yourself, how much of my time is spent on pleasures that leave nothing lasting? How many hours of my life drain away in passive entertainment that I don't even remember the next day? Am I building a life of meaning, or just distracting myself to death? Huxley and Frankl warned us, each in their own way, that the greatest danger for modern humans is not pain or oppression, but life without depth, without meaning, an existence numbed by superficial pleasure. As Frankl observed, it is not suffering as such that matters most, but our attitude towards suffering. And he added, when we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Huxley, in turn, challenged us. Experience is not what happens to you. It is what you do with what happens to you. Today, you have a choice. You can continue in the current of easy pleasure, perpetual distraction, instant gratification, or you can swim against this current, reclaiming your humanity, your capacity to think deeply, to feel fully, to live with purpose. Pleasure may be the trap, but you don't have to be its victim. In our next video, Your Pain Hides Your Greatest Transformation, Carl Jung and Nietzsche's Promise, will explore how these two giants of thought offered a path to complete integration of our psyche, including our darkest and most rejected parts, to achieve what Jung called individuation and Nietzsche called becoming who you are. You'll discover how to transform your most feared aspects into sources of strength and authenticity. If this video touched something in you, share in the comments. I choose meaning over pleasure. Let's see how many are ready to escape this invisible trap. Until our next meeting.